If I asked you to name the deadliest school attack in American history, what would your answer be? I'm guessing you might say Columbine or Sandy Hook or Parkland or one of the ones from the last 25 years that are still seared into our collective memory, because one of the first things everybody always says after such a calamity is that it's a product of our times, of the unprecedentedly depraved age in which we live. We always think we're living in special and unique times, but we're always wrong. So you probably wouldn't guess that the deadliest school attack in U.S. history happened before the lifetime of anyone currently living, except maybe Queen Elizabeth and Dick Van Dyke. You probably also wouldn't guess that there was no firearm involved, but there wasn't. Wednesday, 18 May 1927, Bath Consolidated School, Bath Township, Pennsylvania, 11:50 a.m. A disgruntled local crank and minor government official, whose name we will not mention here because there should be no statute of limitations on refusing to give notoriety to child killers, sets off 500 pounds of dynamite in the basement of the school building, laying waste to the entire north wing, killing 2 teachers and 36 students between the ages of 7 and 14. But that wasn't all the killing that got done that day, not by a long shot. For the killer first murdered his wife back at home at his farm. Then he set the whole place on fire, and when concerned townspeople and the local fire brigade started turning up, they were confused to see the owner of the property driving the other way in his truck toward the school, apparently with a big shit-eating grin on his face. So, while everybody's distracted with this farmhouse and barn being on fire... Oh, and he had tied down his horses in their stalls so to be sure they'd burn to death, just for good measure, I guess. That's when the bomb goes off at the school. The killer drives up to the building a couple minutes after the explosion. Survivors are milling around all dazed, and he calls a few men over to his truck. And he then detonates the 100-pound shrapnel bomb that he's got in the back seat, killing himself, 4 other men, and 1 additional child. 45 innocent victims in the final tally, 7 adults, 38 kids. No school attack before or since has matched that level of carnage. And he meant to level the entire building, north and south wings alike, but the other 500 pounds of dynamite he had secreted in the south wing failed to detonate. So if there's any such thing as mercy or good fortune in a story like this, then I guess there it is. When you hear about this incident, likely for the first time, you might find yourself thinking, wait, why haven't I heard of this before? Why isn't this seared into the national consciousness? Well, it was, briefly, right up until the news arrived 2 days later, on the 20th, that Charles Lindbergh had successfully flown the Atlantic. And let's face it, when there's something momentous to celebrate, it's only human nature that people quickly turn their attention away from the horrifically senseless loss of life they were focused on 24 hours previous. Our short and preferential attention spans have existed since long before social media ever did. The point being, no matter what age you live in, no matter the contents of the prevailing culture, what they might be, there will always be monstrously evil people who commit incomprehensibly barbarous crimes. There will always be, as there always have been, sick bastards who seek to exact revenge or to gain notoriety by slaughtering the innocent. And when you hear about a guy killing his wife, burning down his own house, and then blowing up a building full of school kids, you might think, geez, this guy must have had some pretty severe grievances against somebody. So what were his grievances? Well, he was pissed off that his property taxes had gone up and that he had lost the election for town clerk. And that's it. But you know what didn't happen in the aftermath of the Bath Township disaster? Nobody tried to use it as a weapon against their political enemies, and nobody co-opted the grief of the survivors in order to get some silly piece of legislation passed. The nation's leaders acted like civilized people, and what a concept that is. So back in the present day, let's stop giving Joe Biden a free pass for his obviously depleted mental condition, because this man really is an awful, awful, awful human being. More on that in a moment. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where I once faced down a notorious local gang enforcer named Sugar Smack. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I'm your eponymous host and humble servant. And I would submit for your consideration that everything you need to know about Joseph R. Biden's moral character was contained within the first 20 seconds of the angry, hectoring statement he gave last night in response to the tragedy that took place in Uvalde, Texas. Biden has had a few chances now to play the role of conciliator-in-chief, and he has refused each time, flatly refused, because all he knows how to do is talk shit about Republicans and demand stupid legislation. And speaking of that, you don't need me to tell you that the Democrat media complex has a very predictable pattern of behavior when these things happen, where first, they announce that their opponents in the other party have blood on their hands, they're willing accomplices to the crime, and then they insist that if some current piece of fashionable legislation had been law, then this thing never would have happened, and nothing like it would ever happen again. But those Republicans, they refused to vote for our bill, so obviously they love dead children. Say the people who've been agitating relentlessly for over 2 years now to remove every armed officer from every school campus in the country. But don't bring that up right now. They don't like to talk about that very much. And it probably also hasn't escaped your notice that when they start reading from the gun grabber gospel, they only ever use very imprecise, undefined, unfalsifiable terms. We need common sense gun reform, they screech. But wait, haven't Democrats passed dozens of gun control laws these past few decades? And haven't they referred to each and every one of those as common sense gun reform? So if we still need common sense gun reform today, what the hell were all those other bills for? If this is your guys' fun way of tacitly admitting that they all failed, then can we at least repeal them? So Joe Biden opens his remarks last night, as only Joe Biden can, by bitching about the fact that he has been inconvenienced. The first words out of his mouth are to grumble, "I hope I wasn't going to have to do this anymore." That is pure class right there, ladies and gentlemen. Joe Biden, healer and conciliator, wellspring of human empathy, has just opened his remarks on a national tragedy by complaining that he would rather be doing something else. Most likely watching Murder, She Wrote while enjoying a nice cup of applesauce. But then there was about a 9-second window where he tried really hard to mouth the words of actual empathy. The words that a president, hell, the words that any decent man of conscience should say at such a moment. But it didn't last long because Joe Biden is a sleazy partisan hack to the very end. He doesn't know how to do anything else. So there was one incredibly awkward moment where almost in the same sentence, almost in the same breath, he says, "Tragedies like this should never be politicized, and that's why I'm calling on Congress to pass such and such bullshit legislation." And then he says, and the vice president was really leaning into this one yesterday too, "We know exactly what we need to do to stop this from happening. We just need the courage to act." Really? You don't say. So there's a silver bullet solution to the problem, no pun intended, but you're not going to tell us what it is? Because that's a pretty bold boast to just leave dangling there and never follow up on. It's like saying, "I know an easy one-step solution for becoming rich and attractive. You just need the courage to act. So why aren't you doing it? You're still just sitting there all poor and ugly. Why do you insist on being poor and ugly when I just told you I know the way to get rich and attractive? What are you, retarded or something?" But here's the thing. The Democrats have a perverse incentive to preserve the status quo and not solve the problem. Because gun control is their number 2 source of campaign cash right after abortion. And they're about to lose abortion should the Chief Justice decide to locate his testicles one of these weeks and promulgate the decision that is expected to overturn Roe v. Wade and return the matter to the states where it belongs. So, they're going to be clinging even more doggedly to gun control now, which means they need a steady supply of gun crimes that comport with the political narrative they seek to advance. So if you've got a mass shooting with a white or a Latino perpetrator, that is perfect. We can fundraise off that all day long. We can slide that right into the narrative. But if the attacker is black, that shit is going straight in the memory hole. And especially if the attacker and the victim are both black, which, of course, describes well over 50% of the homicides in the country. In fact, 218 Chicagoans, almost all of them young black men, have been shot to death in that city since the start of this year. And how many weepy statements have been made about it on cable news? How many angry celebrity tweets have there been from the people who always tell us how much they treasure black lives? But let's pose that question to the president and the vice president, shall we? So, Joe and Kamala, why are 18 dead Latino kids so much more important to you than 218 dead black youths. On the streets of Chicago, 18 dead is starting to be a slow weekend. So where is your outrage? Where are your demands for a legislative remedy? And where the hell are you, Barack Obama? Is Martha's Vineyard so cut off from civilization that you didn't hear the news from your own adopted hometown? Or are you just too busy getting paid $30 million to sit around recording dumb podcasts that nobody listens to? Hell, at least Joe Biden does political corruption the old-fashioned way by sending his stripper-impregnating crackhead son jetting around the globe to pick up briefcases full of cash. Hey, you know what? I think I may have just cracked the case. Maybe Netflix is collapsing under the weight not only of their own insufferably woke content catalog, but also under the weight of the contract they signed with the Obamas. Between that deal and the Meghan and Harry deal, that is many millions of dollars for not very many minutes of usable content. But don't feel bad, Netflix. I'm sure those subscribers will come flooding right back when the Obamas and the Sussexes get their creative juices flowing. I mean, come on. Barack Obama's only written 3 autobiographies so far before age 60. Give him the chance to make a big-budget documentary about his own life, and it'll make the extended cut of Lord of the Rings look shorter than a funny cat video on TikTok. But in times of national sorrow, when we the people are crying out for emotional succor and intellectual guidance, we know exactly whom to turn to. Whoopi freaking Goldberg. Whoopi says she is going to punch the next person she hears offer thoughts and prayers to a murder victim right in the face. Am I the only one who thinks this is a really weird thing to get pissed off about? These leftist television personalities say it more and more often, so it's obviously on the talking points list. I just can't fathom what the hell it is supposed to accomplish. People offer thoughts and prayers to the victims of tragedies because, and I know this may be a foreign concept for you, Whoopi, because that is the polite thing to do. It is an acknowledgement that you know there's nothing you could ever do or say that would assuage the grief and the sadness of the person to whom you're expressing condolences. It is the polite person's way of saying, I hope you make it through this. I'm pulling for you. I know it must be terrible. And you have to be a really incredibly dark-hearted person if that's a sentiment that makes you want to strike someone in the face with your fist. But like all the rest of the vapid, angry, moral posturers, Whoopi can't be bothered offering any alternative. These people love to express revulsion at the phrase thoughts and prayers, but they never tell us what they would prefer to have us say instead. I mean, would it be more comforting if we said, oh, your child was just murdered? Well, I'm going to call my senator and demand that he vote for the latest fashionable Democrat Party gun control bill. Is that supposed to be a more fitting expression of one's condolences than saying, I'm sorry, you're in my thoughts, I'll be praying for you? But maybe that's the difference between the America of today and the America of 1927 in which the Bath Township disaster took place. It never would have occurred to any American living in 1927 that there is something improper or untoward about offering one's thoughts and prayers to the victims of an unspeakable tragedy. Just like it would never occur to any American living in 1927 that women have penises and men can bear children. Just like it would never occur to any American living in 1927 that having a secure border is racist. Just like it would never occur to any American living in 1927 that we should be interceding in a dispute between two constituent republics of the Soviet Union. And I guess we have to talk about Robert Francis O'Rourke, who has decided to interject himself into the contest to determine which Democrat politician can come out of this thing looking like the most terrible person. Robert Francis, who's currently running a doomed campaign for Texas governor as a sequel to his failed campaign for senator and his failed campaign for president. Today, he did the political equivalent of a drunk fan stripping his clothes off and streaking across the field at the Super Bowl, because I guess when you were kind of a dumbass skater bro to begin with and you are completely out of ideas for how to insinuate yourself into the conversation, you just show up to an event as a member of the public and start screaming at people in the most inappropriate manner imaginable. I will even go so far as to say I have never seen a politician publicly debase himself quite like Robert Francis O'Rourke did today in Uvalde, where Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Patrick and the mayor of Uvalde and the head of the Texas DPS were holding a joint press conference about yesterday's tragedy. And bear in mind, at this point there were still parents who hadn't received confirmation about whether their kids were alive or dead. Did that stop Robert Francis O'Rourke from making a spectacle of himself and turning the whole proceeding into his attempt at creating a viral video moment designed to kickstart his flailing, fading gubernatorial campaign? Nope, it did not. Was he able to summon sufficient reserves of basic human decency to think better of himself and decide, maybe this isn't the best time for a political stunt? Nope, he was not. And there really are only 4 words that do justice to a stunt like this. What a fucking scumbag. I mean, we thought it was bad with Joe Biden, and it was. He bitches about his own feelings, then he pretends to be comforting for a few seconds, then he launches into an assault on the Republican Party and the gun lobby, whatever that is. I think Joe probably imagines that the NRA is still as politically powerful as it was 30 years ago, which it totally is not. It probably would never occur to Joe that he's not running up against the machinations of the gun lobby, but rather the sentiments of the American people, who are not nearly dumb enough to believe that some stupid law on background checks or gun shows or magazine capacity would magically end the phenomenon of spree killing. And what about root causes? When the subject is immigration, our Democrat friends, all they ever want to talk about is root causes. But when it's an 18-year-old kid massacring a bunch of 3rd and 4th graders, all they want to talk about is the technical details of how the crime was done. The concern for understanding root causes seems to melt away completely, and that is too bad, because for all the innumerable people we have on our airways talking incessantly about every aspect of the events of the day, how come nobody ever thinks to ask this question? What kind of society are we that we keep producing adolescent spree killers who prey on little kids? If there's any aspect of this phenomenon that's unique to the last 40 years, it's that the perpetrators of school attacks have become almost exclusively kids themselves. It seems like that's the thing we should be attempting to understand instead of fixating on the mode of killing that the attacker happened to choose. If the same attacker had hijacked a plane and flown it into the same school building and killed the same people, would crying Chuck Schumer be on TV screaming about how we need to ban airplanes? And speaking of terrible, loathsome, sleazy, morally bankrupt sacks of donkey shit, crying Chuck may have come off looking worse than Joe Biden did yesterday, though not as bad as Robert Francis O'Rourke did, because I don't think that's actually possible now. I'm old enough to remember when the Democrats used to at least wait until after the dead were buried before they tried to turn tragedies to their political advantage. Time went by, and eventually they stopped even waiting for the bodies to be cold. But yesterday, the remains of the victims still lay where they fell inside the school building. The sun had not even set, and there was crying Chuck Schumer screaming on television about how he's going to force a vote on some stupid gun control bill because the Republicans have got blood on their hands. These are the same people who tell us it's offensive and inappropriate to offer thoughts and prayers. And that contrast doesn't require any elaboration on my part. I think it can stand on its own merit for the consideration of each individual. And we'll leave it there for tonight. Have a pleasant tomorrow. See you Friday. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.